no matter how strong the pull of alcohol might feel, nothing can erase your free will. Like you can get to the point where quitting gives you a seizure and you have the
Yeah.
free will to exercise whatever is necessary for you to safely get off the substance. And if you want, decide to reintegrate it back into your life.
Welcome to Peak Human Labs, where I share amazing interviews with incredible human beings who are leaders in how to optimize your health and get you to peak mental, physical, and mental state. My name is Dr. Sanjeev Goel. I'm a physician for the past 20 years, specializing in longevity, precision medicine, and biohacking. And my mission is to alleviate the suffering we all face and will encounter when dealing with illness, sadness, and loss. And to this end, I'm sharing these conversations with people who can shed light on how to live more purposefully and intentionally so that you can be inspired and create your own path to wellness and fulfillment. Hi, everyone. Dr. Goel here from Peak Human Labs. And today my guest is Chris Scott. He is an expert in helping people get through alcoholism. He shares his personal journey with us today. And I hope you really find it inspiring. And for those of you who are looking at potentially dealing with your alcohol issue, I think you will find this extremely interesting. So we'll see you on the other side and talk soon. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hi, Sanjeev. How are you? I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for joining me. Where are you at right now?
I'm located in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, Savannah, Georgia. Is it super hot there?
It's not as hot as it was a month or two ago. So for me, it's cool now. But I was raised in the Northeast, so
Okay.
it took a little bit of adapting when I got down here.
Okay. So we had a little bit of a chat offline, and I thought your story was just so interesting, and it's going to be useful to our listeners to kind of understand, your journey and what you're doing right now. I think is super important. And I find there's a lot of media and social media and all that. You find a lot of people talking about alcohol, like it's become a big thing these days. So I think it's even more timely than ever. Let's dive right into it. Do you want to just maybe take us like a little bit about your background, what you're doing, and then let's dive right into your journey after that.
For sure, absolutely. And thank you. We had a great chat. I think I was on the beach at the time trying to hold my phone while FaceTiming. But I'm always doing something, to kind of get stress release these days, whether it's the beach or martial arts or, lifting weights. And that's why I started something called Fit Recovery. But I'll rewind all the way to the beginning. I'd always been a fairly successful person in the endeavors that I cut out for myself. I crushed it in high school. I was a competitive swimmer. I was swimming before school and then going to school and then swimming after school and then doing my homework and going to bed at 1 a.m. and probably not getting enough sleep and, just very type A. And my parents were great, but, there were signs that I had some sleep deprivation. I was starting to get panic attacks actually by the end of high school. I go to college and all of a sudden I discover alcohol. And I'm actually adopted. I'll return to that in a minute here. And by the way, I'm launching right into my story, if you don't mind. But I think it all tied together. So I'm adopted, knew nothing about my birth parents. Much later, I was told by a psychologist that after a series of tests, that it looked like I had prenatal alcohol exposure. And he wouldn't be surprised if there was a history of alcohol addiction in my family. I've actually had a hearing impairment my whole life, which kind of checks out. That was a birth defect. When I was little, they said, oh, maybe your birth mother smoked or something like that. It was almost certainly alcohol, but obviously she must have quit, or not obviously, but most likely. Otherwise, I would have had full fetal alcohol syndrome, which I don't have. So at any rate, there were some red flags about my drinking when I got to college, and I'd started in high school and I could always outdrink anyone. And for me,
I just want to take a step back for listeners to understand what fetal alcohol syndrome is. And basically, it's a syndrome that affects babies or newborns when the mother has taken alcohol throughout the pregnancy. It's a range, like what you're saying, is that in the very severe cases, people have developmental delays, and I suspect, but it can be very mild. And that's what you're saying with the hearing. I wasn't even aware that hearing loss would be one early sign.
Right. And to be clear, I'm not an expert in fetal alcohol syndrome. This
Yeah.
is something that was told to me
Right.
by, I guess, respectively, a psychologist and an audiologist. I've had
Mm.
60% hearing loss in both ears since I was born. And actually, audiologists can't understand how I can have a normal conversation on the phone. It's probably because I was stubborn as a kid. I refused to wear hearing aids, and my brain adapted to convert the audiological sludge into something coherent, at least to me. But you probably wouldn't want to spend a day with my ears. I would guess it would probably be pretty strange, but I don't know any different, right? It's been like this my whole life.
Okay. So now take us through.
Yeah.
You're saying in college you started drinking, and yeah, tell me more about that.
And there was the polar opposite of my high school experience where I was just like, just boom, 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 get stuff done, clear-minded, but not enough sleep. In college, I would sleep too much. I would still get stuff done. I got very good at getting things done as efficiently as I could so that I had time to explore this new sensation, which seemed to
Yeah.
be totally normalized. And I went to a heavy drinking school in the Northeast in
Mhm.
Massachusetts. And so it seemed like, it's a no-brainer. It's culturally accepted. It's not like I'm doing something alone in my room. At
Yeah.
least not yet. Then I graduate college. By then, I think it was my dad who said to me, like the day after I graduated, that he was concerned about how much I could drink. And I said, yeah, well, don't worry. I graduated college. Not a big deal. I moved into
How
man.
much were you drinking? Like, give us a sense of what was that like.
I could drink 30 beers in one sitting. And then I could go out and play beer pong for 3 more hours. And I'd have a hangover the next day a little bit, but I could do it again. So
And how often were you doing that? Was that just like a binge thing on the weekends,
in
or was that like
college,
an everyday thing?
it was my freshman year. It was probably Fridays and Saturdays. It then turned into, and this wasn't just me, but where I went to college, Tanqueray Tuesdays, and like every day there was a different excuse to drink something, and then there'd be a party on Thursdays, and then suddenly it's most days of the week, and maybe Mondays you're not doing, maybe Sundays and Mondays you're taking off. And I got to the point by the time I was a senior in college that my hands were shaking on Sundays. And my friends didn't seem to be having this problem. So I was drinking more than them. We would probably drink the same amount when we went out. And my friends were athletes. So it was like work hard, play hard. But the difference was, and I realized this too late, we would all pregame.
Hmm.
I would drink more than them in the pregame because I drank faster. We'd go out, probably drink the same amount at the
Hmm.
bars or parties. And then I would post game. So I would come back and literally drink until I passed out. I remember one of my friends saying,
Drink
like,
on your own?
well, yeah,
You were
kind
drinking
of.
on your own, or what?
We would hang out and they were kind of like, blowing some steam off, maybe probably having a water, decompressing from the night that we just had. Some of them might have passed out, like that happened. My brain didn't shut off until 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was just, my drinking would increase after we got back. That's another reason that, and I can kind of get into this. I didn't, as far as I know, I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I was adopted at the age of 6 weeks. I had wonderful parents. I had a perfect family, as close as to perfect as you can get. I mean, I had a hearing impairment, but I didn't think about it. Like, I feel like things are kind of what you make of them, except maybe in extreme circumstances. But I didn't feel like I had so the childhood trauma. I'm sure that's a relevant thing for some people, but it wasn't for me. There was something else going on. It felt like my
Yeah.
brain had something in it that just pulled me for some reason to alcohol, even though everything was great. It wasn't that I felt bad and I wanted to feel better, at least not at that point. It was simply that it seemed like there was something in my brain that wanted me to drink and wanted me to drink more and more and more because I felt like a 9 out of 10 and I wanted to be a 12 out of 10 as far as well-being
Hmm.
goes.
Hmm.
And it did that. So
Right.
what I think is I was wired to have a different and maybe more exacerbated dopamine or endorphin response to alcohol than most people, which might actually make sense if my prenatal bliss experience had been alcohol. So that was another thing that the psychologist told me at some point.
So you weren't like medicating yourself, like with dealing with anxiety or depression or something like that. You think you
No,
probably were getting an extra like pleasure response from the alcohol for whatever genetic reason, or
right. I mean, I did have anxiety by the end of high school. And I think I mentioned that because I had sleep deprivation, but I started sleeping way more once I got to college. I didn't have panic attacks anymore. I didn't end up having panic attacks again until my alcohol addiction got out of control in my 20s, in my mid to late 20s, which I can get into. But no, I didn't feel like I was self-medicating. It wasn't like I was having intrusive thoughts that I needed to, put out. There was
escape
nothing
from?
like that.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't trying to escape. I was trying to enhance what was already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I felt like when I had a drink, I could think more clearly. Where other people were getting sedated, I was getting stimulated. So I got energy from it.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
loved to have a bunch of drinks in college and engage in intellectual conversations. And of course, what happens is your tolerance goes up. So what used to take 2 or 3 drinks suddenly takes 4 or 5, and then it takes 9 or 10. And then when most people they can't comprehend it all, it can take 19 or 20, or 30. Maybe not cocktails, but standard units, shots. It's not uncommon for someone with an alcohol addiction to be able to put down 1 or 2 or more big bottles, 750 milliliters of alcohol in a day. So I wasn't there in college, but it
Mhm.
kept escalating. I worked in finance after college. I was studying for the CFA, which is not an easy, it's a 3-part test. And I was going to New York Public Library. Hands are still shaking, trying to retain information. Well, luckily, I got moved into a different group where they said, right before I was going to take the level 1, they said, you don't need this. We need you working on other stuff. So I was like, thank God, because I think I would have failed. But I was still drinking. And
Mhm.
I kind of moved to like a pattern of a bottle of red wine a night. I would pick up a bottle of wine on the way home from work most nights. Sometimes I'd white knuckle, make it 2 or 3 nights without it. And then my discipline would just evaporate. And I just feel pulled to it.
So
And
you were trying then already, if you were trying to go some days without, you were already thinking, hey, maybe this is a good idea to cut down.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you were already thinking of that in your mind. That so normally just for our viewers, we as physicians we have what's called the cage questionnaire. Cut down. Do you ever feel the need to cut down? Which looks you were. Other people getting annoyed. Was that happening?
Not yet. So
Okay.
like 23, 24, I was trying to cut down. I mean,
Right.
25, 26, other people were getting annoyed
Mhm.
because I stopped being as coherent as I should have been in like the workplace. Now, I was still getting my projects done. I was still getting things done, but I just
Yeah.
had like I remember, and I never got fired per se because of
Mhm.
alcohol. No one ever mentioned alcohol to me, but I remember a boss saying to me like, you seem like you got a blank stare in your eyes and you just seem agitated. I was like, well, of course, I'm going through alcohol withdrawal every
Mhm.
time I'm at
Mhm.
work. Yeah, got to that point.
And what about the third one is G for guilt. Did you ever feel like guilty about drinking?
Yeah, I felt like I would become a weak person. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing. A lot of people think they are a bad person
Mhm.
because naturally when you have a behavior is not good and it's common to imbue it with some moral significance. Like I don't
Mhm.
know if everyone considers drinking to be a sin, but I know excessive drinking tends to be considered that. So if you keep doing that, even though you try to quit, you just throw your hands up at some point. You go, I'm a piece of, I'm a bad person. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a really damaging thing. It took a while for me to heal from that.
And then the last one is E for eye opener. Did you used to drink in the mornings?
I got to that point. That was my rule for a long time. So I had a bunch of rules when
Okay.
I was in finance that like don't drink before 5 p.m. So
Yeah.
that turned into me being an absolute beast getting work done that should have taken me till 1 in the morning. I actually got it done. And then I would leave at 5, but that would piss off my bosses too. Cause they'd be like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Like he's getting it done, but like, what are you doing? We're all here, It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
5, have to have a drink. Then that turned into like, all right, I'm kind of being an asshole. I'll go have a drink at 5, but I'll just step out to the fancy wine bar next door,
Mhm. Mhm.
have a
Mhm.
couple glasses, get rid of the agitation, get my mind to be clear again, which
Mhm.
that's a
Mhm.
strange thing for a lot of people to understand. But if you're going through withdrawal and you have more of the substance, your mind clears up. You can think more clearly because you're not going through withdrawal. Your glutamate and cortisol and everything's not going bonkers. So I would do that, and then I would come back. And of course, I had gum, I had Listerine, I had little snacks I could eat so no one would smell it on my breath. The whole thing was planned out, and it was absolutely exhausting. Just the amount of damage control that I had at the time. I had eye drops, just various things. Again, no one ever called me out for it explicitly, but would I have been better off without it? Absolutely. And then it got to the point where, well, I feel so god awful at noon because of the amount that I drank last night after I said I wasn't going to drink, then I'm going to go to that same wine bar, see if it's open. And it was open because it's New York City. Have a few then. And then of course it gets earlier and earlier. And then it gets totally insane, to the point where I show up, I'm about to walk into work at 9 in the morning and I think I can't do this. I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm going to have a stroke or a seizure or a heart attack. My blood pressure's through the roof. I didn't have any prescription medications to cover up for any of that because I hadn't been prescribed anything. And I was always wary of prescription drugs. So I would say, all right, well, I'll be an hour late to work this morning. I'll say I got food poisoning and I'm going to find something. I'm going to look for a bar that's open right now and have a few drinks so that I can make it through the day.
And so who knew about all this? Like, who did you disclose to? You have a girlfriend or some parents or brothers, sisters, anybody else, that friends that you were kind of disclosing this to?
No one knew it got to that point, but there were signs. When I was 25, I weighed 35 pounds more than I do now. And I'm not a small guy. It's like kind of like if I'm in a good phase for fitness, I'm 215. So I was, yeah, I mean, I was pushing almost 260 at one point. My face was huge and red. It just wasn't great. My hands were shaking. My parents noticed that, but no one knew anything. None of my friends had experience with alcohol addiction, and they didn't tend to know what the signs were. I think they all know now. I think more people know now because we've had an uptick in alcohol addiction in recent years. Yeah. But it was only me who knew, at the time how severe it was. And I thought, and I don't know how common this is, but I think it's somewhat common. I thought I was uniquely bad. Like I assumed like whatever this is, like I'm just, yes, alcoholic, bad person, demonically cursed, all the things that has to be me because it was crazy.
Okay. So I can see, this is like your life's basically falling apart. Your body's falling apart. How did you get out of that? What happened next?
Right. What happened was I'd moved to Atlanta to take a different job because I kind of thought like, maybe it's just Manhattan that's driving me nuts. There's too many sounds and places. My anxiety was going through the roof, which is what happens, with at some point in the progression of alcohol addiction. And after about a year in Atlanta, I realized this is not helping. I just moved somewhere. 3 days went by and I didn't make it to work for 3 days in a row. My boss, he's a much nicer guy than the one in New York, but I just thought this is it. I have to do something. Told him what was going on. I told my parents what was going on. Told my 5 good friends, and I'm really lucky. I've always had the best friends. Some of them were my drinking buddies in college, but they were always more than drinking buddies. They were actual good friends, kind of like brothers. And then I had a few from high school, and they all supported me. They said, do what you need to do. So long story short, my parents drive like 4 hours and they get to Atlanta, and I basically disappear into a bar for several hours when they got there. And that's not the type of person that I am. But I started going through withdrawal. And so I said, all right, I'll stop in there for 2 drinks. That turned into like 25 drinks. And I reappeared and they were pretty distressed, and then all of a sudden, next thing I remember was I was in a hospital. I had not had an event, but we were going to go leisurely take our time and select maybe an inpatient place or an outpatient place. No more leisurely selection when I came back. Pretty drunk. And I wasn't usually drunk until the end of my drinking career. It was hard for me to get drunk. So I was usually the guy who drank twice as much as everyone else and then carried people home and then went home and kept drinking. Like that was me. But by the end, I think my body had just weakened to the point that I probably had trouble processing alcohol. So it's a good thing I stopped when I did. And so basically what happened was I was in inpatient rehab, a very AA 12-step based place for, it's a blur, but several months, 2 to 3 months, somewhere in that range. After that, I don't want to speak badly about people there, but there were some disagreements that I started to have. And, of course, one of the aspects of that philosophy is that you shouldn't trust your stinking thinking. It's what got you here. There's probably something to that for people who haven't regained their mental clarity at all.
You shouldn't trust your instincts. Sorry, what is it?
Sorry, they say don't trust your own mind, basically.
Oh, don't trust
your mind. Yeah, you have a disease. Don't trust your mind. You need to like totally surrender. Let other
surrender
people tell
to
you
somebody
what to do.
To the higher power. And
correct. Yeah, I want to be careful because I have very nuanced views in this. I have no problem. Unlike a lot of people, I don't have a problem with the higher power concept, but I did have a problem with the concept of like a permanent spiritual disease, which is what they said it was. And I thought, like, all right, of course, there has to be a spiritual aspect to anything with behavioral and possibly moral ramifications. But what if there's something else going on here? And then, of course, the other thing that they would do is try to dig up childhood trauma constantly. And,
right. And you had nothing like that. You had a very...
Right. And I'd fully, accept that for many people that's significant. But I was like, I don't think I'm spiritually defective. I really don't. Like I had a serious problem. I didn't have childhood trauma. I mean, we're all traumatized to some degree, right? But it doesn't seem to explain the severity of the issue I had. Like, so what is it? Of course, I came to the conclusion after delving into a bunch of orthomolecular research and pioneers like Dr. Kenneth Blum in the 1980s and 90s and Joan Matthews Larson and Julia Ross, who really came up with the approach known as biochemical restoration or nutrient repair, that this is primarily a biochemical disorder that it can be resolved, which does not necessarily mean that it's a good idea to go back to drinking, but that my brain was out of balance for some combination of genetic and environmental reasons. Suddenly, everything made sense. I thought, all right,
Hmm.
for some reason, the term biochemical disorder made sense because a disorder is not necessarily a disease. It's not necessarily lifelong, right? It's a collection of symptoms. As far as
And
it
it can
being,
be resolved. Like
yeah,
it can go away.
exactly. Right. So if I hadn't found that, I'm not sure what would have happened, to be honest, because I was seriously contemplating. I got to the point, and I fully, accept that for a lot of people, they credit AA with saving their lives. And good. My motto is whatever works for you, do it. Everyone's different. But for me, I got to the point where if I went to another AA meeting, I thought I was going to go to a bar afterwards. And it could have just been where I was, but I couldn't relate. I had trouble relating to people there, and for a number of reasons. But it seemed like I just had a sense that there were things people could proactively do that would help them with this problem if they experienced anything like what I did. And I realized looking back at my alcohol addiction, especially when I worked in finance in Manhattan, I got no sun. I was in the office all day, or I was at home drinking, right?
Mm.
So very little sun, barely got fresh air. My
Right.
sleep was a disaster
Hmm.
because of the alcohol. But even if it was like my sleep schedule would still have been a disaster. I'm sure my gut microbiome was totally screwed up because my diet wasn't good. I'd all but stopped exercising. I'd have these pathetic little attempts at a workout in the Equinox gym. So I'd spend 8 minutes on the elliptical and say, I'm going in the steam room and going home. Now, the steam room was probably the best thing I did, but I wouldn't have known why. And I probably didn't stay in there long enough because my hands would start shaking. I have to go get a drink. So now, fast forward however many years, it's integral for me, and I'll talk in a minute about what my program is, if you don't mind, but it's
Yeah.
integral for me to cover all these bases, like the basics. Every day I get fresh air and I get sunshine and I get cold plunge if I can get it. Sauna. I bought an infrared sauna. I thought it might be a frivolous purchase. It's one of the best things I've done. So like I still have this brain that wants release and wants stimulation, but I'm giving my brain that with these holistic methods. And also, I mentioned earlier, I think before we started here, I started doing MMA, boxing, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I do Pilates. I lift weights. I did a lot of lifting weights after I quit drinking. And that, like, deadlifts probably did more for me than any modality taught in rehab ever did.
Mm.
Like, when I got out of that rehab center, I could barely deadlift 200 pounds. Fast forward a year and maybe a few months, and I was deadlifting 600 pounds. And I just incrementally got there. And it got to the point where, like, whatever that rush was that I was getting from chugging a bottle of wine in my 20s, I could get it from a pyramid set of deadlifts and go home and take an Epsom salt bath and then sleep amazingly and wake up the next day and say, actually, I don't live in a malevolent universe.
Hmm.
And maybe I do have a brain that's wired in a
Hmm.
bit of a different way, but I can get my fix without alcohol. So that's where fit
Yeah.
recovery came from. And for me, it was fitness first, and then the advanced nutritional strategies that really helped came after that.
How long did the recovery take? And then tell me about fit recovery. Let's chat about that.
I'll say within about a month of leaving the inpatient rehab center I was in, I was fully engrossed in those books that I mentioned, Alcohol and the Addictive Brain being one of them by Dr. Blum, Joan Matthews Larson's books, Julia Ross, Dr. Abram Hoffer. Anyway, so there's a bunch of books in this, like, from what I could tell, suppressed science of biochemical restoration using 100% natural compounds, namely, and I'd say the champions of which are the amino acid precursors for neurotransmitters. I became a guinea pig for those. And I just ordered stuff from Amazon. I went to GNC, and I should actually mention, and I forgot about this, when I was in that inpatient rehab center, they really discouraged exercise, which is another disagreement I had with them, because they said, you're going to get addicted to, like, running on the treadmill, and that's your
Oh,
disease. It's going to get activated. You're going to get
wow.
it. Don't go to GNC because you're going to get addicted to protein powder. Literally said that. And so, of course, I got pissed off. I went to GNC, bought all these supplements. I knew what they were. One of them was L-Glutamine. L-Glutamine, and I was megadosing all these things. And L-Glutamine is cool because it helps repair the gut, helps regulate blood sugar, and it turns into GABA in the brain, combined with magnesium and vitamin
Hmm.
B6. So I was
Yeah.
getting all these things. Suddenly, my sugar cravings that had appeared out of the blue when I was in the inpatient rehab center totally went away when I was taking like 10 grams a day of L-Glutamine. And I didn't put two and two together until maybe a month or two later, when I started reading these books, and they're saying, yeah, use L-Glutamine so that you can restore your natural GABA, or get rid of the sweet tooth. That kind of, oh, that's what happened. So I was like, if there's one nutrient like that, then there must be a lot. It can't just be one nutrient. So,
Mhm.
if you look at my medicine cabinet now, it's filled with probably 400 supplements. I'm the guinea pig for all sorts of things. So that began a phase after I got out of that center of probably 6 months where I was just experimenting constantly. And I found the things that worked for me. And I'll say, just three of them in just to be brief, even though there's much more than that. One was magnesium. And I think at the time I had magnesium taurate, but then I switched to citrate. And then, of course, after that, like I learned about glycinate and L-threonate, which is what I take now. But at the time it was magnesium taurate. And I took like half a gram of that for 2 weeks. All of a sudden my sleep came back. I had been on trazodone for sleep in rehab. It made me go to sleep, but then I would wake up at 4 a.m. feeling manic. I mean, to this day, I don't know much about trazodone or a lot of drugs, but all I knew is I threw that out as soon as I had that experience with the magnesium. I didn't keep taking that large dose of magnesium. I was like, this is a superpower, like what I just learned from these books. So like I had the glutamine, the magnesium, and then there's an amino acid called DL-phenylalanine, which helps to boost natural levels of dopamine and endorphins. And that was huge for me because I still had cravings. It's like you're supposed to go to meetings and pray away the cravings and all that and call your sponsor. And I took not that much. I mean, probably 1,500 milligrams per day of DLPA, DL-phenylalanine. I felt better and sharper, and for somehow it just helped evaporate the cravings. Now everyone's different, and there's a process of trial and error. It's biochemical restoration is way more than those three compounds, and it gets complex. Like Dr. Blum would say, like, don't overdo it with the glutamine because you can end up putting yourself in a situation where what he called reward deficiency syndrome gets more activated because you don't have enough dopamine and other activity. So you don't want to like mega dose your GABA forever. So it's a nuanced thing, but I got lucky with my trial and error, and I thought to myself, like, first of all, I was thinking, what am I going to do? Because I kind of had a mutual separation with my finance job. They gave me the opportunity to resign, and I was like, all right, yeah, I resign. Thank you. But if I hadn't, I think they probably would have fired me because they witnessed the end of my addiction, which was not, luckily not catastrophic. I was never belligerent. I was never a horrible, like, violent person, but I wasn't myself. So they never, unfortunately, got to know who I was. And I thought, I want a fresh start. I want to help people. I became a part-time personal trainer. And in Atlanta, that was cool because I got to feel what it was like to actually help people. I had clients now who had diabetes. We're watching week after week. And of course, I'm not the only one helping them, but I get to see progress and the smile on their faces. And I'm used to counting, glamorized beans in finance. All of a sudden there's someone who's lost 20 pounds by working with me and making a few lifestyle tweaks. I was like, this is awesome. I have to do something that's an extension of this. But I didn't want to keep doing it because it was a grind. Actually, I'd started meditating, which was another modality that to their credit, the inpatient rehab center did encourage. And so every morning I would meditate for like 15 minutes. It's kind of like reclaim my mornings from the time when my morning was just like an awful period where I'd be cold sweating and trying to button my collar around my bloated neck. All of a sudden, the words fit recovery like flashed in front of my eyes. I thought, that's cool. And I go to see if I can buy fitrecovery.com, and it costs $2,500. And I thought, damn it, I can't do that. So I bought fit-recovery.com. I did end up eventually buying fitrecovery.com. Thankfully, it was still available. I bought fit-recovery.com. I sat down. It took me about 6 weeks to write a book called Drinking Sucks, which is on Amazon. I'm skipping a little bit here because that was about 2 years after I had gotten out of that inpatient center. So I think around 2 years, 2.5 maybe, I wrote Drinking Sucks. And that was just kind of
how many years ago was that? When was that?
So it was 11 years ago that I got out of the inpatient rehab center.
About nine years
so
ago.
I've been addiction free for 11 years. You might notice my terminology is a little bit different. I don't say like I've been in recovery. I would say I'm recovered, which to me doesn't imply that I couldn't possibly activate the addiction again, but I recovered from it. You recovered from COVID. You might get it again if you're not careful. So that's kind of how I'd see it. I feel like I don't want to get into semantics, but I feel like words are important.
Well, I think it's very important. I think this is extremely important for people to hear that, because I was going to ask the question, like, can you even have a drink? Like, are you able to have a drink now? And what does that look like? And,
I guess a very unorthodox opinion on this. I currently, I'm a non-drinker. I've been served accidentally so many times. And there have been times where like I think I got served accidentally at where was I? I was in this is probably 4 years after. Yeah, I think I was 4 years at that point. I hadn't had a drop of alcohol, and I went to a hottest day of the year, a restaurant, and ordered a mocktail. And they bring me over. It's very loud, and they brought me over this cocktail. They probably had a very similar name. I take a sip, and it's like pure gin. It's like, and I probably had 3 shots of it. And so one thing I learned was that my tolerance had gone down after not having alcohol for that long. The strangest thing, though, was that I didn't have any pleasure. I didn't seem to have a dopamine or endorphin reaction to it, which is very strange. It felt like someone had put sludge in my gas tank. I got up and I didn't know what to do. You know, and of course, all the like dire stuff that they'd said in rehab came back to me, like, you know, one drink will reactivate your disease. You're going to end up in jail or institution or AA. You know, you're going to end up at a liquor store. And none of those things happened. I kind of sat with it, and I got home and I lay down and I was kind of tired, and then it just wore off. And I thought, that's interesting. But it was interesting to me that A, it didn't activate anything, but B, I didn't get any pleasure because I wasn't seeking relief and I wasn't coming from a place of deficiency or withdrawal. So it occurred to me that when I had been drinking the way I was in my 20s, it's because like my serotonin, GABA, endorphins, dopamine, et cetera, were like maybe at 10% of where they should be. So alcohol would like temporarily boost them. You know, of course, but I'm spending tomorrow's neurotransmitters today. So it turns into a cycle and I do it again the next day. But after I'd done nutrient repair, my neurotransmitters are at like 90 or 100% or maybe 80 or whatever. So I just don't get relief or pleasure or anything like that from the alcohol. Now, I do, and I've had clients whose goals have been to moderate their drinking. And I used to not work with people like that because they just think like, you need to quit, like don't be in denial. And then I read a very interesting book called The Freedom Model. I interviewed the author of that book. I think Mark Sheeran is his name. Very, very interesting guy. I don't agree with anything, or I don't agree with everything in any book I've ever read, but he had a very interesting premise, which is that like, no matter how strong the pull of alcohol might feel, nothing can erase your free will. Like you can get to the point where quitting gives you a seizure, and that happens, but you still have free will. And you have the free will to exercise whatever is necessary for you to safely get off the substance. And if you want, decide to reintegrate it back into your life. Now, I'm engaged to a woman who does not drink. It's like the universe is a very interesting thing. I want to have a totally alcohol-free home. But of course, it's like, you know, they say life is short, but in some ways life is long. So it's like forever is a strange word. So I had never totally sworn off alcohol. And I still haven't sworn it off completely. I don't like swearing things off because to me, that creates an elephant in the room. You know, honestly, there are people in AA who say the same thing. That to me, it seems a little more depressing. It's like, because it's usually prefaced by like, I really want a drink, but I'm not going to drink today, but I might drink tomorrow. You know, it's like, that's not where I am at all. To me, I've transcended the substance. Like, have I not had a drop of alcohol in 11 years? So clearly I have. But it's not something I'm not going out and drinking. Like, so for me, like, it's not like counting the days that you've had that alcohol has been in your system. It's not some sacred thing to me, but I am a happy non-drinker because my life's better without it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you're helping people now kind of who are dealing with alcohol issues. Tell us about what Fit Recovery is like. So just, is it a
sure
program? Yeah.
You know, as I said, I wrote the book Drinking Sucks, like 164 pages. I tried not to make it a memoir, but it was very much like a little introduction to nutrient repair and then a bunch of holistic strategies that I felt like were not covered when I was in rehab. So then I wrote like 200 blog articles and made a bunch of YouTube videos. I had a podcast with a guy named Matt Finch, who had a company called Opiate Addiction Support, which basically did the same thing I did, but with opiates. And he later joined the Fit Recovery team and has been an awesome coach. He's probably coached hundreds of people. So with Fit Recovery, we offer a 6-month group coaching program called Fit Recovery 2.0. And that's my attempt to create like video lessons, written lessons, private community, and weekly group coaching calls. And soon we're interviewing more coaches so that we can have more coaching calls than that. But it's my attempt to create as close to the experience someone would have if they worked one-on-one with me. So in a more standardized way. And the reason it's 6 months long is because I find that it's my opinion that most people can achieve biochemical restoration with like a 6-week customized nutritional protocol, and they can basically rewire their brains in 6 months, which is less than what they say in rehab. They usually say 12. Actually, I think they say 6 to 18. That average is 12. I truly believe that for me, like within 6 months of doing nutrient repair, I didn't even recognize my life. I was in a much better place. Like the habits had changed, the patterns have been disrupted, replaced by new ones, and the neural pathways in which alcohol was associated with everything pleasurable and relaxing and desirable and necessary, all the things had dissolved. So it's a 6-month group coaching program. That's the flagship program, Fit Recovery 2.0. But I also work with people one-on-one, and I have a 6-week program and a 6-month program.
How would one know if one is kind of on the fence? Because when in medicine, the way we're taught is that we call it there's a pre-contemplation stage where people have no idea. They're really not at the thinking that, hey, they have a problem. Then we try to move people to what's called a contemplation stage, where like we get them to think, hey, they're thinking about potentially quitting, but they're not sure. And then the next step is action stage. If someone's listening to this, how would you say, hey, you're the right person, we're the right people for kind of where the stage they're at? How would they be
that's
knowing
a great
that?
question. So I love the stages of change model. I think about it often. I tell all of my clients about it. And I usually say to my clients that, and this is where they tend to be, somewhere between the pre-contemplation and the contemplation stage, or they're somewhere between the contemplation and the action stage. They're not quite at the action stage. Most people who find fit recovery are in a haze. Yeah. And that's probably the case with a lot of rehab programs as well. And I recall what that felt like. It's like, because I kept a journal. I didn't journal every day because I wasn't consistent by that time, but I would write down my goals. It's like back when I was 25, maybe I'd wake up, I'd have a moment of lucidity, and I would say, this week I'm going to conquer my alcohol problem, hire a therapist, go to AA or whatever. And then I would earnestly believe that. And then 3 months would pass, and I would remember that I'd written that down like 3 months before. So I was just, it's a haze. Your sense of time is off. What I would say to those people is that there's never going to be what appears to be the perfect time in which the universe aligns such that it's convenient for you to take action. You have to force it. And what happened to me was I kind of got lucky because it wasn't a health event. It wasn't a disaster. It wasn't even a DUI. I never had a DUI. I never had any legal problems back from those days. Easily could have, I'm sure, gotten unlucky and gotten to that point. But for me, it was missing 3 days of work. That wasn't the worst thing that had happened. The worst thing that had happened was that I was destroying actively my body and my brain and my respect for myself. But luckily for me, it was really about my health and my self-efficacy. They got to the point where I was left with no cards and I couldn't keep up the act anymore. So if you're lucky, maybe that's your worst case scenario. But that's the best case scenario, actually, because most people are not that lucky.
Again, why were they not that lucky?
A lot of
What do you mean by
they end up having a seizure. They end up having a seizure. They end up having a stroke.
Or the DUI, they may end up like a broken
DUI.
Yeah,
correct.
Broken family or something bad could happen. Yeah, I guess
exactly. Yeah, their whole family leaves them.
Right.
So yeah, these things happen, and they can happen quickly.
Yeah. So even if someone is a little bit, hey, like I'm not even sure I have a problem, or like, hey, this is somewhat affecting, or I'm not sure if I should deal with this issue. What you're saying is that, hey, even that type of person could benefit because it might help move them along. Because it's, we used to say that, it's a progress. That it wasn't just like one would go from like completely having a problem to quitting in an instant. Like there's a kind of a journey, a natural journey of multiple attempts and a lot of work, hard work, I expect.
So I'm really glad you brought that up. I don't think people have to hit rock bottom. That was another thing we were told at rehab. I don't believe that's true. I think you just have to summon the belief. Like, how do you create a belief or a conviction? I don't know. Like Tony Robbins seems to be a good place to start. Maybe listen to some of his videos. Get yourself to the point where you have a why that's big enough for you, or realize that like you don't invent one. It's your family. It's your career, whatever it is for you. You need to have a why. For most people, like the pleasure of the transformation or the perceived reward needs to be higher than the pain of the transformation. In other words, the pain of quitting. Like, all right, I'm gonna have to tell my friends I have a problem, or I'm gonna have to like do hard work. Like that can be perceived as painful. The pain of the problem itself needs to be increased in magnitude in your perception. You need to see it for what it is. It needs to be there, right? If you have no pain from your drinking, then you're unlikely to change. But also the perceived reward of making the change needs to be high as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so like that's kind of a mental game. I think journaling is a great way to do it. And like just writing out your scenarios. Like, what does your life look like in 6 months if you don't do anything? And is that acceptable? Is that something you're willing to tolerate? And what's the pain involved there? Or what's the pleasure? Maybe you have a wonderful time drinking all the wine and the beer and the liquor. And I say that non-judgmentally. If that's the case, then, then that's the case. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe you shouldn't quit. But I have yet to hear someone tell me after going through this kind of transformation that they wish that they'd kept drinking, that they feel like they're missing out. What people are missing out on is the best version of themselves.
I think that's also an opportunity cost too. Like, yeah, one might say it's doing okay, I'm fine, and not like, nothing's broken right now. But you're also pointing out that, hey, you can reach your peak potential likely without alcohol. It has more downside than upside.
Correct.
Unless you're having an occasional social drink or whatever.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's probably the case for everyone. Yeah, I think Joe Rogan quit drinking recently. He didn't have a problem. And excuse me, he was asked why. And he said, I think he said it was affecting his workouts the next day, even if and he said he drank moderately, but have a cocktail or two. He's like in that third or fourth set, just not feeling it. And he said, I think something like, if you want to do great things in your life, alcohol is just not your friend. So I think that's the case. So when you start thinking that way and you see all of the people, like, I don't know, I saw the Formula One movie recently. Brad Pitt apparently quit drinking. It's like all these people that I wouldn't think would have had a problem. And I think he actually did have a problem, are not drinking. It seems to be somewhat of a trend. And I think it's a healthy one. I think it's a good one. And the fact is, why not quit drinking for a year and see how you feel? Because I think most people vastly underestimate where they could be in terms of their fitness goals, their professional goals, their family, being present for loved ones.
Well, I loved it. This was great. I hope our viewers got something interesting from it and something they learned. Where could they reach out to you if they want to learn more and they want to potentially connect with you? How could they do that?
Sure. So, fitrecovery.com. We have a contact form on there. I am not the most active on social media, but that may change. I am on Instagram at Chris Scott Fit Recovery. That's Chris, and then there's 2 T's in Scott. And also, if they want, they can just email me at chris@fitrecovery.com.
Okay, awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And then, hopefully they're going to see this. And I think I'm really excited. Thank you so much I learned a lot today.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
I don't normally get a chance to really get that type of in-depth chat with my patients, so it's really nice to hear from.
Amazing. Well, I've had a great time speaking with you, and I would love to maybe have you on my YouTube channel if you want to, and learn more about your story and what you do. Because I think, your Peak Human is really cool. I've looked at your website and everything. So best of luck to you, man. We'll be in touch.
Okay. Talk soon.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed today's talk with Chris Scott. Unbelievable story. And I learned a lot myself. If you're interested and you want to reach out to him, go to fitrecovery.com. You can also find him on Instagram. His handle is in the notes. And it was just definitely super interesting. I wasn't aware about the biochemical nature of treating alcoholism, and I think that was really eye-opening, something to really think about, that is not just a potential psychological issue, but there may be a biochemical issue as well that we can treat and help people not get that high when they're taking in alcohol. All right, talk soon. If you enjoyed today's podcast and you felt you learned something that can help you on your journey, please hit subscribe, like, and I'd love it if you'd share this with a friend who you think would also benefit and get inspired. And leave us a review. We're always looking for feedback on how to deliver more value to you. So take care. Until next time, I'm Dr. G from Peak Human Labs Podcast.